Welcome to On the Radar. I'm Kate Doyle from ABC Weather, still coming to you from my kitchen while I continue to work from home. Now, it has just gotten cloudy here in Hobart after a beautiful morning. This is On the Radar, the weather show where we chat about all things weather. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, today we're planning on talking about fires, both on the ground and in the sky. Now, it is the very first time that we are actually going live. So apologies in advance if anything goes wrong, but the production crew has been working really hard behind the scenes. So fingers crossed we get through this whole show without too many dramas. Now, last week I did say that we were going to be talking about cyclones, but as it's relatively quiet in the northern tropics at the moment, and as we had horrific fires go through Western Australia last week, we're going to mix it up a little bit, although I suspect there will be other opportunities for us to talk about cyclones rather in the future. So the plan today is to touch base with one of my Western Australian colleagues to talk about what it's like on the fire grounds after those fires that went through over the weekend. Then we're going to be listening to the always knowledgeable Nate Byrne as he describes one of the more ferocious potential outcomes from fires, pyrocumulus or pyrocumulonimbus. Then I'm going to answer a few of your questions about fire. So if you have any more questions, please put them into the comments below and we'll do our best to get to them later in the episode. And then finally, it is the International Day of Women and Girls in Science tomorrow. So to celebrate how far we've come, we've been digging back through the ABC Australia Retrofocus archives. So we've got a little bit of sneak peek back in the day footage to show us there. And that's the plan for today. So to tell us about how it's been in Western Australia and what it's like on the ground now, I spoke to Angus McIntosh from the ABC Great Southern Bureau earlier today. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us, Angus. How's the weather today in Albany?
It's actually beautiful in Albany today. I'm just in the studio, a cool sort of 18 or 20 degrees after a very different story last weekend, I'm afraid. But at the moment, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and so you've been reporting on the fallout from the fires over this week. Can you tell us what it's like out there?
It was a really unexpected and fast-acting weekend, I'm afraid. 4 separate fires over the range of the Great Southern and Southwest of WA, as much as 300 or 400 k's apart from one another, and all broke out within a matter of hours. It was devastating, and it came out of nowhere for communities all over the place.
So what kind of damage have you been seeing?
It really depends on the different fires that we're speaking about, but in the Great Southern region, there were fires that burned in the order of tens of thousands of hectares, possibly in excess of 10,000 livestock killed, unfortunately. Some very old native bushland burned. It's horrific stuff to see, and some of the pictures that people have been sharing online and the stuff that we've seen out of the office has been catastrophic for those communities.
It just sounds awful. Is this the first time you've been having to report on fires?
Personally, yes. We're coming off what was an exceptionally wet and cold 2021. So for this to be how 2022 starts, it's been really shocking. Like, it really just came out of absolutely nowhere for this part of WA. But thankfully, upwards of 1,000 volunteer firefighters stepped up and got us across the line. And thankfully, all of those fires have now been downgraded to just an advice warning as opposed to an emergency. So thankfully, it seems like we might be out of the woods, but we can hope we're out of the woods.
Great. Well, best of luck with the rest of the summer. Hope you don't have to do too much more reporting on fires. I guess we'll just see how it goes. But thank you
I
so much for
certainly
joining
hope
us.
not. Yeah, thanks a lot, Kate. I appreciate it.
So if you're just joining us, that was Angus McIntosh from Western Australia talking about the fires that they've had there earlier this week and over the weekend. Now, apologies for the audio there. It appears like we were talking over each other a little bit. That wasn't Angus just jumping in super keen. That was some issues with our audio, but hopefully you still understood us okay. Now, for anyone just joining us, this is a live rendition of On the Radar, our weekly weather chat, where we chat about all things weather. Now, the next thing that we've got up today is a video explaining the ferocious pyrocumulonimbus clouds, which we do sometimes get in super extreme fires. So to explain those for us, we've got the ever knowledgeable Nate Byrne.
Most of us know that a bushfire can be sparked by lightning from a thunderstorm, but did you know that a thunderstorm can be created by a bushfire? I'm not a pyromaniac myself, even though I do like fire, but there are some clouds that are. And when they form, they get such incredible powers that they can destroy everything in their path. Some of the most extreme bushfires that Australians have endured, like the Black Saturday fires or the Canberra fires, were made significantly worse by the weather that these fires created themselves. In order to get clouds, you need to get air from the surface high up into the atmosphere. So when you have a bushfire, it can heat the air around it, and if conditions are just right, it can rise up and form a type of cloud called a pyrocumulus. Now, if conditions are perfect, if the fire is really intense, if the atmosphere is unstable, that air can get really, really high, like super high. We're talking 12, 15 kilometers or more. And on its way up to those great heights, ice can form and you can get violent winds and thunder and lightning. It's all very, very frightening. And when that happens, the cloud evolves into a type of cloud called a pyrocumulonimbus. We're essentially just talking about a thunderstorm here, but it's a thunderstorm with a terrifying fuel source at its fingertips. And when this pyromaniac cloud really heats up, that's when it gets some terrifyingly destructive superpowers, like the ability to hurl burning embers up to 30 kilometers away, or to strike lightning 100 kilometers downstream from the fire front. That can create even more bushfires. They've even been known to hurl down large black hailstones. One of the most terrifying superpowers that these pyromaniac clouds can get is the ability to make tornadoes. Wait, no, actually scrap that. It's the fire tornado. That's where you just get a tornado and fire, two of nature's most terrifying things, and then just mash them together to get a tornado made of fire. One of the most destructive fire tornadoes we know about was during the 2003 Canberra fires. 4 lives were lost and more than 500 homes were destroyed, but residents knew that it wasn't just a bushfire. When they came home, they found cars flipped and trees ripped out of the ground and thrown kilometres away. Such a large area was alight during the fire, and so much energy was released into the atmosphere that during the 10 minutes of most intense flaming, there was more energy released than during the explosion of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. All of these superpowers mean that the pyromaniac clouds can create even more destruction and can create even more bushfires. And that means they have the ability to multiply. They also create incredibly strong winds. There's gust fronts and updrafts and downbursts. And that can make fire move in completely unpredictable ways. That can put firefighters and residents' lives in even more danger. Unfortunately, it can be extremely difficult for the Bureau of Meteorology to forecast these pyro clouds. And with the unpredictable way they move and the complete destruction they can bring, it's best to just be as prepared as possible and get out of their way. Just out. Move. Shoo. Like just out. Don't even think twice. If you're told to evacuate, move.
This is On the Radar, where we chat about all things weather, and today we're talking about fire. Now, thank you for everyone who did send through their questions all through the week. Now, the most common question that we have received is, why is it flooding in the east of Australia but fires in the west? Now, it is a good question, and the answer does come down to largely La Nina, which I'm sure everyone is sick of hearing about by this point in the summer. But really, it's because we've got that La Nina system. So that's bringing about warmer waters to the north and the east of Australia. And what that's doing is providing lots of moisture in the atmosphere. So then when our weather systems move through, it means that they drag that moisture down across northern Australia, down across all the way down into the southeast. So we get wet and flooding conditions for the north and the east of the country. But because the southwest of Western Australia gets lots of their moisture off of the southern and Indian Oceans in the form of cold fronts, it means that they're not tapping into that tropical moisture. So they're not getting the kick that the rest of the country is getting with all of those La Nina conditions. So it means that they're dealing with a hot, dry summer. And as Angus said earlier, they actually got quite a good wet season this year. So lots of grasses and trees and shrubs grew. So that means that now that they've had a chance to dry out, we're dealing with huge amounts of fuel that's ready to burn. So as Angus said, it doesn't take much now for those conditions to really get supercharged, and we lead to really big catastrophic, or even it doesn't have to be catastrophic conditions for it to be a bad fire day. So that's the situation at the moment. Basically, the southwest just doesn't quite tap into that tropical moisture the way the rest of the country does. Now, thank you very much for everyone who did send in their questions. If you've got any more, please comment away. We'll see if we can get to them. If not, they can be great for next episodes. And the other thing that we're going to be talking about today is the Aurora. So let's change gears to those fires in the sky. So if you're just joining us, my name is Kate Doyle, coming to you from my kitchen because I am still working from home. And this is On the Radar, where we talk about all things weather. Now, over the last week, we had some magnificent images of auroras come into the Facebook group that we help manage here, called Weather Obsessed. Now, we had reports of auroras and great photos come in from both Victoria and Tasmania late last week. Now, this is a beautiful example of from Fergus in Tasmania. Now, thank you so much for everybody who did send in their pictures. And if you are also interested in the weather and have any questions or any photos or any information you'd like to share, Weather Obsessed is a great place to do that. So thank you so much for joining me on our very first live episode of On the Radar. Hopefully we got through most of it okay for most of our platforms. So thank you very much for putting up with us. We're still gearing up with this series. So if you do have any suggestions of what you'd like to see or any suggestions, please do pop them in the comments and we will definitely listen. The last thing that we were going to touch on this week, though, is that it is the International Day for Women and Girls in Science tomorrow. So to celebrate that, we have been going back through the ABC Retro Focus archives as part of the ABC's 90th birthday celebrations. Now, we found in that archive a TV broadcast from back in 1992, which was before I was born, talking about how to get girls more involved with science. So let's roll that tape.
Scientists from the CSIRO are going back to school, but not for their own benefit. Their task is to get more girls to take on science as a career, and their target, boys whose attitudes are believed to be one of the blockages. Science reporter Gavin Gilchrist.
Astronomers working the Anglo-Australian Observatory begin probing the centre of our galaxy. But do you notice anything special about this workplace? It's typical of Australian astronomy. There's not a woman to be seen. By contrast, in some Western countries, like France, there are more women astronomers than men.
That's the exciting bit about my job, because you're finding things that have never been, you've never seen before.
Rabina Atrupchek is one of a rare breed, a female astronomer. She's also part of the CSIRO's Women in Science project, talking science careers to primary school children. Australia's problem is that to age 15, girls are as good at science as boys, but many take it no further.
We're really losing 50% of our potential good physicists by not showing them that they can get a career in science.
Rabina enthuses about black holes, galaxies and UFOs.
How do they put up the radio telescopes in space?
Part of the talk aims to break down the stereotype that scientists work 24 hours a day at a laboratory bench with no idea of the real world and no involvement in family life. So she tells how research and family life can fit together, like when she was at the Parkes radio telescope observing Neptune while her daughter slept on the floor of the control room in a sleeping bag.
And she'd wake up in the morning and have a little look to see if Neptune was any bigger, getting any closer.
The project's found talking to girls alone is not enough.
We're not just acting as role models to girls, we're wanting women scientists to go out and also show themselves to boys, so that they can also see that women have a place in science.
Progress will be slow and hard to measure, but the hope is that a valuable resource will in future not go to waste.